Let's implement now a different way to deploy the model that's very popular in the industry. In the previous session, we added a step that would automatically deploy the model as part of the pipeline. What happens in real production applications is that sometimes we want a human in the middle of that workflow. So we don't want a model to go directly to production before somebody rubber stamps that model. Somebody maybe runs a set of tests that are not necessarily automated at that point. Somebody gives the final green light. So how can we do that? How can we do that in SageMaker? Well, fortunately, we have the ability to use events to do that. So take a look at this diagram that I have here. And this is what's going to happen. We're going to have our pipeline stop again at registering the model. But before, we were registering that model in approved status. We're going to change that. We're going to register our model in pending approval status. So it's a different status that's going to indicate that the model is not necessarily ready yet for production. What's going to happen is that as soon as a data scientist or a manager or an engineer, whoever is in charge of deploying that model, as soon as that person approves that model in the model registry, we are going to trigger an event, and that event is going to call a Lambda function, the same Lambda function that we created in the previous session. And that Lambda function, as you know, is going to deploy the model to an endpoint. So we're basically breaking down the workflow and adding a human in the middle. That human has to approve the model manually. The humans will take care of testing the model, doing whatever they have to do to ensure the model is approved. And as soon as they approve that model, the AWS system is going to automatically deploy that model. So let's see what we need to make that happen. So first of all, we're going to be using Amazon Event Bridge. I'm going to click on the link here. I have it here so you can find more information about Event Bridge if you want to. But basically, this is going to allow us to respond to events by triggering other things in the platform. In our case, we want to respond to the event of a user approving a model in the model registry, and we want to trigger a Lambda function, which is the Lambda function that we already defined in the previous session. Going back to the code here, I'm going to start by creating a new model group. So before, you've seen that we've worked with the basic Penguins model group, right? That's the group where we added our basic model, our basic TensorFlow model. Here, I'm going to create a new model group because I want to register models that are not going to be approved by default in that model group. Okay, so I'm just creating a new one. It's going to be called Pending Penguins. And now I'm going to set up Event Bridge. So when you want to set up Event Bridge, you want to write, or you have to write, the definition of the event. So this is the definition. I'm following the structure that obviously SageMaker gives you. This is the definition of that event. We have a source. The source of the event is going to be SageMaker, a detail type that tells us what the specific event is, and the details is SageMaker model package state change. This event is going to get triggered whenever a model package, which refers to a model living in the model registry, whenever the status or the state of that model changes from approved to pending approval, or from pending approval to rejected, or from whatever state to another state. The details are, well, the package group name that matters is pending model package group. That's that I've just created. So I'm only going to be listening to events that happen in that model package group, and the status has to become approved. That is the definition of my event, or the event pattern. Let's now create the Event Bridge rule. And I'm going to show you in the UI where you can see these rules. The name of the rule will be Pending Model Approved Rule. You can set whatever name you want. I'm going to be using the Events Client Boto3 API, and I'm going to be calling the put rule function here. I'm going to pass the rule name, the pattern that we just created. I'm going to make it enabled by default, that you can go there and just disable a rule so it doesn't trigger. And I'm going to specify my roles, the role that's going to give this rule permissions to call the Lambda function, etc. After that, we need to put a target on that event rules. We already defined what the event looks like. Now we need to define what's going to happen when that event happens, right? And what we're going to do is trigger a Lambda function. So we need to put a target. We specify what the rule is, and the target will be the deploy Lambda function. We're going to use the function ARN of the function that we created in the previous session to deploy the model automatically. So I'm reusing the same function, and I'm specifying that the target of this event rule is calling that function. Let me check up to that point. Let me stop there. Let me open here Event Bridge. Actually, you get that, I think it's rules right here. Opening rules. I have 5 rules. It's a bunch of rules, stuff that I've done before and whatnot. And let me see. What do I get? Pending model approved rule. I'm going to click on the rule. You see what the pattern is, the event pattern is, it's right here. The target of this rule is my deployment function. You can see it's linked here. It's Lambda function, and the input is the event. So what's going to happen is that the event is going to match. So Event Bridge is going to detect, oh, something happened and I should be listening to that. It's going to call my Lambda function because that is the target, and then is going to pass the event as a parameter to that Lambda function. So that means that within the Lambda function, we are going to be receiving the event details of the matched event. If you remember in the previous session, we were talking about how I needed the Lambda function to work in 2 different scenarios. One, when you call it directly from a pipeline, and the second scenario is when Event Bridge calls the Lambda function. Let's take a look at the Lambda function and see how we treat that input, which is, sorry, almost knocked this microphone out. So it's the match event. Let's see how I treat that. So I'm going to go back to session 12, which is where we define the Lambda function. And here is what I'm doing. And by the way, there is an explanation here of what's happening. So if this Lambda function is called from Event Bridge, there is going to be a detailed property inside event. So I'm just checking if that detailed property there. And if that's the case, I'm going to capture the model package ARN, and it comes in this particular location. And I'm going to be capturing the approval status of that model that is going to come in this particular location. So now that's why down here, I make sure this Lambda function does not execute unless the approval status is approved. What's going to happen is that this Lambda function might get called when the status changes from approved to something else, and I don't want to deploy it there. That's how the Lambda function determines or gets the parameters from 2 different places depending on who calls the Lambda function. I think it's neat that we can use the same Lambda function for both scenarios. All right, so let's go back here. We were setting up Event Bridge, so we did this. We need to do something else for this to work, and we need to add permissions to the Lambda function to get called by Event Bridge. It's a lot. So the permission thing is a whole history here. We need to configure that Lambda function permissions. So you're going to see here how I add permissions to the Lambda function, and the permission is invoke. So the action is invoke function. The name of the function is this one. Who is invoking the function is events.amazonaws.com. What is the source event that is going to be calling this function is the rule that we just created. The statement ID has to be Event Bridge. And then if there is a problem here, if that permission is already added, I'm just capturing the exception and doing nothing. After doing this, let me show you what the status is going to be. I already show you what the event looks like here in Event Bridge. Let's look in the Lambda interface so you see what you should be seeing on your side. So first of all, look at this. See this connection here in the function overview? You can see that Event Bridge is calling this function, and you can see that dependency right here. It's a trigger. That's what they call it. So this function is a trigger of Event Bridge, of a rule in Event Bridge. You need to see that after you run session 13. You also need to see if you go to permissions, and I think it's configuration permissions, you also need to see this particular permission, this resource-based policy statement, which is the one that we just added. The statement ID is event bridge. The principal, you get it here, which is events.amazonaws.com. And the condition is, well, if the ARN is equals to the specific rule, then allow that to invoke this function. If you don't see this permission, the event is going to fail silently. It's not going to be able to call the Lambda function, to invoke the Lambda function. So make sure that that permission exists after you run session 13. That is all the config that we need. We just need to prepare our pipeline now and remove the deployment step, let it run. The pipeline here is not going to look different from the previous pipeline. We're just removing the deployment step. What's going to be different is the result, because now we should get that model in the model group registered as pending approval. Let's see what else am I doing here. I'm registering the model. Now in the new model package group, so I'm registering the model there, and look at the approval status. I'm specifying pending manual approval, not approved. Remember, by default, this create registration step that we created, let me go there. By default, I was using approved status, but we're not anymore. We are passing pending manual approval. Great. Now I'm going to modify the condition step. Why am I modifying the condition step? Well, if you make a modification to the registration model step, you just have to create a new condition step to pass it. In this case, notice I'm not deploying the model. I'm just registering the model. That's it. And now we can define our function, our pipeline, and our pipeline is going to be session 13. You have already seen this. There are no modifications in comparison with the previous pipeline. Again, the only thing that's different here is that there is no deployment step, and the registration is registering models in a different model package group with pending manual approval state. So I already ran this. Let's go to SageMaker Studio. Let's go to pipelines, session 13. Let's open the last one that I ran. You get the pipeline right here. So that's awesome. And let's go now to the model registry and pending penguins. That's the section where we registered our new model. And this is the model. This is version 2 of the model that I just registered here. Notice that the status is pending manual approval. So this model is not ready to be deployed yet. My pipeline finished and my model is sitting here ready to go to production, but somebody has to come and has to click the button. Let's click that button. By the way, before we do that, let me go to the endpoints and show you that there are no endpoints. See, the list of endpoints is empty right now. I'm gonna go back to the model registry, pending penguins. I'm gonna go click on this version 2 model, and I'm going to change the status, update model status. Let's say I'm the manager that's saying, you know what? This model looks good. I'm changing the status, adding a comment. I'm going to save an update here. This is going to trigger that event. So now the model is approved. And by the way, if I click on the model, I should be able to see somewhere probably the activity. Status updated to approve. And here is the comment that I just typed. And if I go to the endpoints, now you see the endpoint is being created right now. See, it's in status creating. So it automatically started the deployment process by calling the Lambda function that we defined in the previous session. And it's doing that only because I changed the state of that model from pending manual approval to approved. This is a very common pattern or workflow that companies use to prevent or to add another layer of checking or evaluation to that model. It's usually very helpful when there are certain tests that you cannot automate or you haven't automated yet, right? Because if everything is automated, you wouldn't need this, obviously, this human in the loop process. But if you have certain tests that you want to run before the model is approved, this is the perfect scenario for you. Hopefully this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next session.